There is an island in the Mediterranean that officially belongs to Italy. It sits in the Western Sea, roughly level with Rome, and its people have been Italian citizens since 1861. But if you measure the distance from that island's coast to the nearest piece of Italian mainland, the number you get is around 190 miles. And if you measure from the same coast to the nearest land of any kind, you reach France. The island is Sardinia. And the fact that Sardinia is physically closer to France than to the country it belongs to tells you something important, not just about Sardinia, but about Italy itself. Because Italy, despite being one of the most recognizable shapes on Earth, is not really one place. It never was. We learn the shape of Italy before we learn almost anything else about it. The boot. Jutting down from the Alps, kicking out into the Mediterranean. No country outline in the world is more immediately recognizable. But a country is not its outline. And Italy's outline has spent 160 years hiding something that geographers, economists, and Italians themselves have been arguing about ever since. This is not one connected territory. It is 4 separate geographical worlds that a political map has declared one country. And to understand why, you have to start not at the boot, but at the flat land in the north, the one part of Italy that functions like the rest of Europe. Stretch a line from Turin in the west to Venice in the east, and you cross what Italians call the Pianura Padana, the Po Valley. It is a flat, wide, river-fed plain that covers about 46,000 square kilometers in northern Italy. That is roughly the size of Denmark. The Alps rise to the north. The Apennines close in from the south, and between them sits the most productive piece of land in the country. The Po River runs through it for 650 kilometers, from the Alps to the Adriatic, feeding an irrigation network that has been farmed intensively since the Middle Ages. Today, the Po Valley generates more than 40% of Italy's entire GDP. It is home to Milan, Turin, Genoa, Bologna, the industrial triangle, the fashion capital, the financial center. Nearly half of all Italian cities with more than 100,000 inhabitants sit within its boundaries. And crucially, it connects naturally to the rest of Europe. The Alpine passes to France, Switzerland, and Austria have carried trade routes for 2,000 years. If Italy were only the Po Valley, it would be a compact, well-connected Central European country. A slightly larger Switzerland, perhaps, or an elongated Belgium. But Italy is not only the Po Valley. Below the plain, the country changes shape. And when it does, everything changes with it. The Apennine Mountains are the spine of the Italian peninsula. They run for approximately 1,200 kilometers, from just south of Genoa all the way to the tip of Calabria. And they do not stop there. Their geological continuation pushes under the Strait of Messina and reappears as the highlands of northern Sicily. At their widest, they stretch 250 kilometers across. Their highest peak, Corno Grande in Abruzzo, rises to just under 2,900 meters. They are not especially tall mountains by alpine standards, but their placement is devastating. Think about what the Apennines actually do to a peninsula that is, at most points, only 150 to 200 kilometers wide. They do not run along one edge, leaving a usable interior. They run down the middle, not as a single ridge, but as a broad, tangled mass of parallel chains, high valleys, and seismically active terrain. The result is that peninsular Italy has no real interior at all. It has 2 thin coastal strips, pressed against the mountain wall on either side, with the mountains themselves taking up most of what is in between. The asymmetry matters too. The western slopes of the Apennines descend gradually toward the Tyrrhenian Sea, creating the foothills and low plains where Rome, Naples, and Florence were built. The eastern slopes, facing the Adriatic, are steep and abrupt. They drop quickly to a narrow coastal plain that leaves almost no room. This is not just a landscape difference. It is why, for most of Italian history, wealth, infrastructure, and political power accumulated on one side of the country and not the other. On a map, crossing peninsular Italy looks like a short drive. In practice, it can mean navigating mountain passes, narrow roads through high valleys, and terrain that resisted railways until well into the 20th century. The Apennines were not designed to be crossed. They were designed, if mountains can be said to have a purpose, to be endured. There is a word in Italian, Mezzogiorno, that translates roughly as midday sun. It refers to the southern regions of the peninsula below Rome, and its use as a political and economic term dates back to the first decades after Italian unification in 1861. That it needed a special name should tell you something. The economic gap between northern and southern Italy is one of the longest-running and most studied regional disparities in the developed world. In 2024, GDP per capita in the south stood at roughly 21,700 euros. In the north, the figure was nearly 39,800 euros. The south, in other words, produces at roughly half the income per person of the north. That gap has not closed in living memory. Across the 1990s and 2000s, despite hundreds of billions of euros transferred from Rome and from Brussels, the South's share of northern income actually fell from around 60% to roughly 55%. Economists and historians debate the causes endlessly: organized crime, institutional weakness, immigration, insufficient investment. All of these are real, but underneath them all is the geography. The north had flat land, navigable rivers, alpine passes to European markets, and a climate suited to dense settlement. The south had mountains that compressed and isolated its communities, a drier climate that made large-scale irrigation difficult, and no natural connection to the wider European economy. The north industrialized around Milan and Turin in the late 19th century, for the same reason that Sheffield and Manchester industrialized before Palermo and Reggio Calabria: terrain and connectivity. The Apennines did not cause the Mezzogiorno problem, but they shaped the conditions in which it became almost inevitable. Take the Italian peninsula, follow it all the way down to its southwestern tip, to the region of Calabria, the toe of the boot, and look across the water. What you see, 3 kilometers away, is Sicily. 3 kilometers. That is the width of the Strait of Messina at its narrowest point, between the Sicilian Cape of Piloto and the Calabrian shore. On a calm day, you can see cars on the other side. Sicily is the largest island in the Mediterranean, at just over 25,700 square kilometers. It is home to 5 million people. It has been part of Italy since 1861. And there is no bridge. The idea of a bridge across the Strait of Messina has been formally discussed since at least the 1960s. A construction consortium was selected in 2005, with work set to begin in 2006, and then the project was canceled. It was revived in 2009, canceled again in 2013, reconsidered in 2016, revived again in 2023 under Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, given final government approval in August 2025, and then blocked 2 months later by Italy's Court of Audit. As of now, the project is in legal limbo, again. The proposed bridge, which, if built, would have the longest suspended span in the world at 3,300 meters, carries an estimated price tag of 13.5 billion euros. To be fair, the strait is not simply a body of water. It sits at the junction of 2 tectonic plates, experiences strong currents, and lies in one of the most seismically active zones in Europe, the same fault system that destroyed the city of Messina in a catastrophic earthquake in 1908. These are genuine engineering challenges. But what makes the Strait of Messina story so revealing is not the engineering. It is the 70 years of political will, reversed, revived, reversed again, that have not produced 3 kilometers of bridge. For 5 million people on the largest island in the Mediterranean, the connection to their own country depends on ferries, and the word eventually. And then there is Sardinia. If Sicily's isolation is measured in 3 kilometers and decades of delayed construction, Sardinia's isolation is a different order of magnitude entirely. Sardinia is the second largest island in the Mediterranean, at around 24,000 square kilometers. It lies roughly 235 kilometers from the nearest point on the Italian mainland, a journey of between 5.5 and 15 hours by ferry, depending on the route and operator. There is no bridge to Sardinia. There is no tunnel. There is no rail link of any kind between the island and the mainland. There has never been one. But the distance itself is not even the most striking fact. Sardinia is geographically closer to Corsica, a French island, than it is to mainland Italy. It is closer to the coast of Tunisia than it is to Naples. And the native language of the island, Sardo, is not a dialect of Italian. Linguists classify it as a separate Romance language, one of the closest surviving relatives of Latin, with layers of Arabic, Catalan, and Spanish woven into it from centuries of non-Italian rule. Sardinia was governed by the Crown of Aragon for over 4 centuries. It became part of the Italian state not through any natural gravitational pull toward the peninsula, but through the specific dynastic and political circumstances of the Risorgimento. What Sardinia illustrates, more clearly than any other part of Italy, is that the unity of the Italian state was always a political act, not a geographical one. The geography, left to its own logic, would have produced something else. Several smaller states, shaped by their terrain, connected to the sea lanes that served them best. What it produced instead was a country whose internal contradictions are still, 160 years later, being negotiated. Italy is the 3rd largest economy in the Eurozone. It has more UNESCO World Heritage Sites than any country on Earth. Its manufacturing sector is the 2nd largest in Europe. By almost any measure you choose, it is a remarkable country. We teach children to draw the boot, the toe, the heel, the spur. It is the geography lesson that almost everyone remembers. But the boot is not the country. The country is a flat northern plain that faces Europe, a mountainous peninsula that faces inward, an island 3 kilometers away that might as well be 300, and an island a 15-hour ferry ride from the capital that speaks a language closer to Latin than to Italian. That is the geography of Italy. It has always been more complicated than the shape.